To the Chief of the General Police Headquarters in Ankara. If you wish to meet with a person who for 20 years has kept silent despite being held unofficially, totally alone in solitary confinement subject to unprecedented oppression due to groundless suspicions, and to speak honestly and seriously, I shall say the following to you briefly. Firstly, it is an irrefutable, recorded proof that two courts having for 2 years scrutinized my works and letters of 20 years could find nothing that oppressed the government or infringed public security, so acquitted all my books, both confidential and otherwise, together with myself. Evidence that my life 20 years ago was spent devotedly for this country, and nation was the commander-in-chief of the armies applauding my services as the commander of a militia force in the Great War, and the leaders of the Ankara government applauding my service to the national movement, and the parliament greeting me on seeing me there. This means that the terms meted out to me these 20 years are altogether arbitrary and illegal. In the course of these years, I have spent 40 religious festivals all alone in seclusion. Enough now. I am at the door of the grave, so don't make me look to the world. Moreover, as chief of the police headquarters, you should support my services. For as has been established by courts of law, when the lessons of the Risale-i Nur look to this world, they preserve with all their strength the foundations of public security and protect them against corruption and prevent revolution. The fact that the police of 3 provinces have understood this is proof that the Risale-i Nur's lessons resemble sacred moral police. Recently, the officials have expended considerable effort to scare the people away from me, and I have understood that they did this in order to deter public attention, which I anyway do not deserve. So, I tell you, as I have told my closest brothers confidentially in letters, that I in no way accept public regard for my person. In fact, I reject it absolutely since it is opposed to our way and our sincerity. I have even offended some of my close brothers in connection with this. All I have accepted are the predictions made by certain persons of olden times that allude to the value of the Risale-i Nur, which expounds the all-wise Qur'an's truth superlatively. As for myself, I have proved that I am merely a common servant. Even to suppose the impossible, I had sought public attention, it would have aided public security and been beneficial for the police. Death cannot be killed, so is a matter more important than life. 90% of people work for the advantages of this life, but the Risale-i Nur students strive against the awesome assaults of death, which will unavoidably befall everyone. Endless thanks be to Almighty God, we can show hundreds of thousands of witnesses to testify that for hundreds of thousands of people up to the present, the Risale-i Nur has transformed the eternal sentence of death into their discharge papers. Although patriotic lovers of the nation like yourself should have applauded this fact and encouraged us, we have been subject to baseless accusations and oppressive surveillance. Just how far this is from justice and patriotism I leave to your sense of fairness to judge. Said Nursi, who is being held in unofficial solitary confinement. To Afyon Police Headquarters. Relying on your humanity and conscience, I am going to describe to you some confidential matters. You are closely concerned with us by reason of your duty. This is proved by the fact that during the last 20 years, none of the 100,000 Risale-i Nur students has been the cause of any incident, nor have any of numerous police recorded anything against us. I heard from a child that the chief of the Ankara police headquarters had come here. I wrote some things down thinking that he would ask after me, and that since I am indisposed, I would present it to him. Then, I heard that he had left, so I am sending it to you with this letter. If you consider it appropriate, you may forward it to him for his information. I don't know about worldly affairs and I don't meet with people. Apart from you, I have no one here to consult with. For any matter concerning myself is very unimportant and minor, but those concerning the Risale-i Nur holds great importance for this country and nation. I tell you with all certainty my firm conviction resulting from numerous signs that in the near future this country and nation and its governments will have intense need for works like the Risale-i Nur in the face of the Islamic world and the world as a whole. By means of it, they will demonstrate their excellence, honor, esteem, and historical pride. Said Nursi. My dear loyal brothers, Ali Efendi, one of the Nur students from the village of Aliköy'ü, asks about a Quranic verse about the dissemblers. I don't have time at the moment to explain it at length, so I'm writing a couple of sentences briefly. The verse, which states that the ritual prayers should not be performed for dissemblers when they die, refers to the dissemblers of that time who were known to be thus through divine revelation. It does not mean that the prayers cannot be performed for people who are merely said to be dissemblers or assumed to be. Anyone who pronounces there is no God but God is a Muslim, so long as they do not explicitly deny religion, or if they repent, the prayers may be performed for them. There are many Alevis in that village, and some of them may be extreme, but even the worst of them should not be said to be dissemblers. The dissembler has no belief, heart, or conscience. He opposes the Prophet, upon whom be blessings and peace, like some atheists now. The extremist Alevis and Shiites, however, do not oppose the Prophet, upon whom be blessings and peace. They rather nurture excessive love for his family. They go to extremes in the face of the dissembler's neglect. When they exceed the bounds of the Sharia, they become not dissemblers, but innovators. They become sinners, not disbelievers. It is enough that they do not attack Abu Bakr, Umar, and Osman, whom Ali, maybe God be pleased with him, held in respect for 20 years and accepted their rule when they held the position of Shaykh al-Islam, and that they hold those three caliphs in respect as he did, and perform the obligatory prayers. Moreover, since through the testimony of al-Jaljalutiyya, the Risale-i Nur student's foremost master after the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be blessings and peace, is Imam Ali, may God be pleased with him. If the Shiites and Alavis who claim to love him do not heed the lessons of the Risale-i Nur more than the Sunnis do, their claim to love the Prophet's family is false. Anyway, I heard several years ago that through the efforts of 3 Alis in that Alevi village, innocent children were writing out the Risale-i Nur and spreading it. I even included the village in my prayers at that time. God willing, through the efforts of our brother Ali, who wants to be Imam there, and the endeavors of brothers like Küçük Ali, the heir of the late Hafiz Ali, my supplications for them will not be in vain, and the two groups in the village, the Sunnis and Alevis, will unite. Don't worry about the humiliating incident recently. It fizzled out and their plans came to nothing. The man involved is now denying everything in order to save himself from public opprobrium. I didn't know it was him, otherwise I wouldn't have said anything. He stretched out his hand and removed the kerchief from my head. He found the courage to insult me like that because he had heard that some high-ranking officials had come here from Ankara. The officials did come here, but the governor did not allow me to speak with them, since he is from Rumelia. So, for my part, in order to send him via the Afyon police chief the piece addressing him that I had sent to you, I posted it with the attached note to the Afyon police headquarters. I am not in any way upset about this. Anyway, it is no longer important, so don't you be anxious. Also, I saw clearly that as always, divine determining had transformed their injustice into a significant instance of mercy, and I offered thanks. I received your letters yesterday while awaiting the truths you were going to send me after the festival. I saw the words, if there is no indication to the contrary, we shall send them in 10 days' time. Evidently, you were worried so did not send them. There is nothing to be anxious about. But it was a fine example of involuntary caution not sending them when those high-ranking officials were here and they are not arriving. I received Salahuddin's very lengthy letter which pleased me as much as 10 letters and showed how these storms had not affected his loyalty and steadfastness, and that he was ever like an Abdurrahman, and that our brothers in that region worked tirelessly, and I exclaimed, MashaAllah. Father and son are unshakable like the Sparta heroes. However, since the Risale-i Nur is now being printed and published, true sincerity, powerful mutual support, and disregard of one another's faults are essential, and our brothers in Kastamonu province have to resemble those of Sparta in sincerity and solidarity. God willing, they will not allow their personal feelings to harm this sacred service either. Also, it is true that the Risale-i Nur has won its freedom with its shining, powerful truths and has defeated its enemies in one respect, but we need to be even more cautious than before. For dissembling enemies unceasingly seek pretext and try to deceive the government. Salahuddin asks about a personal matter and wants to attach himself to worldly social life. But he is one of the select Nur students, so he should in no way attach himself if it causes harm to the work of the Risale-i Nur. He may do if he knows that his life companion will work and assist him in the Risale-i Nur service like those of some of our select brothers. For their lives belong to the Risale-i Nur, and they may matter if approached by students representing its collective personality. God willing, it will cause no harm, and his parents are in favor of it. My dear loyal brothers, don't worry, there is nothing to be anxious about. Only, before the Ankara police chief and some high-ranking officials came here after the festival as though they were secretly concerned with me in some way, an officer assaulted me lightly, taking courage from their visit. But they regretted it afterwards. And there was no cause to worry after the official's visit. I reckon the matter affected my brothers to an extent, and Faizi was bothered somewhat. I am curious, on what pretext did they search him? What were they looking for? What was it all about? What could they have been searching for when after 2 years of investigations 3 courts have returned all our books and letters without exception, and they have understood that we have no connection with the politics of this world? Perhaps these illegalities are being perpetrated in the name of the law due to some private jealousy or grudge, or due to the incitements of coward atheists. In the face of all this, total steadfastness and solidarity are necessary, and to be in no way shaken or perturbed. My dear loyal brothers, we met only briefly in the mosque. I have a few important things to say for you to bear in mind. Firstly, I send my greetings to our valuable brothers, the sincere friends of Sabri, who has performed 100 years of duties in 10 years in Bedre, like Hakkı, Hulusi, P, Mehmet, and Shamlu Süleyman, and Bahri in Barla. Secondly, the duty blessed Mustafa, Küçük Ali's elder brother, has inherited from Abdurrahman. He is carrying out to the letter together with his son. His work and service are being perpetuated, so he shouldn't worry. The luminous seeds Hafiz Mustafa sowed together with the late Hafiz Ali at that time are yielding abundant blessed produce. And the services he performed for me in prison after Hafiz Ali died always recall him to me. Abdullah Çavuş, an important heir of the late Lütfi, together with the heroic Tahiri have made Atabey resemble my village of Nurs. İslamköylü Abdullah performed many services for the Risale-i Nur when Hafiz Ali was alive. I send my greetings to all of them. I offer prayers for the blessed people of Tahiri's household, which is like a small Nur school. I send greetings too to İslamköylü Halil İbrahim, who is like a fresh sample of Hafiz Ali and calls to mind the loyalty of Milaslı Halil İbrahim and to the brothers there who resemble him. Also, tell Rushdi's heroic brother in Sparta, Burhan, that he has greatly pleased us and has performed much work for the Risale-i Nur with little. I did tell you that, so don't forget. And go and see Zekai and say that I offer thanks to Almighty God that He has returned my nephew Abdurrahman to me in the form and name of Zekai. You know the other things I told you verbally, for you are my leader. My dear, loyal brothers, I was indeed happy at your letters, this time cheerful about the Risale-i Nur's being unrestricted and spreading by means of the printing press. Nevertheless, heroic Tahiri's coming here to work at this important matter caused me to look to the world. I said to myself, since my brothers want this so much, we will search for a solution. Then, at night, it occurred to my heart that for two significant reasons divine providence does not permit its complete freedom and its being printed in the old letters in its entirety. The first reason, as Imam Ali, may God be pleased with him, indicated, it is a valuable act of worship for eager people to spread the lights of belief secretly by writing out copies with their own pens and to get others to write. It is like performing jihad with ink, which in the next world will weigh equally to blood of martyrs. If the works are printed, those people will not strive with the same eagerness, and they will miss out on performing the service of disseminating those works. The second reason, an essential duty of the Risale-i Nur is preserving the Arabic alphabet, which is the script of the vast majority of the Islamic world. If it is printed and published, its treatises will be mostly printed in the new letters, which is all most people know now. This will constitute a fatwa for the production of the Risale-i Nur in the new letters and cause its students to prefer the easier script. For this reason, until now, it has not been left completely free, although it deserves it and is worthy of it. Thanks be to God, it has won its freedom through the power of its truths. Even although it is prohibited to print in the old letters, it had Ayatul Kubra, the supreme sign, handed over to us and displayed a mighty instance of wonder working. Now I have sent the fruits of belief and the conclusive proof to Istanbul with Tahiri to print in the new letters, for they are both very important and necessary for everyone. Only I did not have time to correct the 10th and 11th topics, so gave them to him without doing so. If it is to be printed, you correct those two topics fully and return them to him. Both treatises must also be printed in the old letters, either at home or abroad, openly or secretly, or in Istanbul or elsewhere. We also need to try to have printed in the old letters in a single volume, as far as means allow, the miracles of the Qur'an, Mucizat-i Qur'aniye, and its appendices, and the miracles of Muhammad, upon whom be blessings and peace, and its appendices, either in Istanbul or elsewhere. This should be preliminary to printing Hizb-ul Nuriye and Hizb-ul Qur'an in the old letters so as to preserve the visible miracle of the coincidences in the Qur'an of miraculous exposition. It is imperative that this sacred matter be undertaken with caution, deliberation, and mutual consultation. I pray for the peace and well-being of each and every one of my brothers and offer endless thanks to Almighty God that Katib Osman and Halil Ibrahim, two of the oldest students, persist unshaken and unchanging in their steadfast loyalty, providing a fine example for many others. An addendum to the supplement to the 27th letter. In His name be He glorified. God's peace be upon you and His mercy and blessings. My dear loyal brothers, I have now received the literary, lengthy, and extraordinarily panegyrical letters of Hasan Feyzi, who is one of the chief heirs of the late martyr Hafiz Ali and a lofty representative of the Denizli Nur students and interpreter of that town's extraordinary attachment to the Risale-i Nur. His letter elucidates fully my brief explanations of the Risale-i Nur's exceeding value in the letter I wrote in connection with its being returned to us about our brother Hafız Mustafa's work. His letter elucidates also the statements I made in my letters about premonitions and is a powerful testament of Denizli testifying in favor of the Risale-i Nur, and as a scholar and retired teacher of the modern sciences of long standing, I consider his shining testimony to the Risale-i Nur to hold great importance. However, in my view, it would be appropriate if the parts concerning myself are either skipped or amended. 2 or 3 passages should not be shown to everyone, so I have underlined them and sent the letter to you as an addendum to the 27th letter or its supplements. You can write out and put this part of my letter at the beginning of his letter. Our brother Hasan Feyzi should not be offended at our skipping a number of sentences, for they are unnecessary for all the students, but may be left in some confidential copies. Hasan Feyzi has entered the body of the Risale-i Nur's collective personality, which is as though directly a collective personality of the truths of belief and the Qur'an, and having assumed the dress of its members, addresses it with extraordinary praise and applause. As I looked at it, objections occurred to me and I thought it excessive, but then the reality of the Qur'an responded in meaning. Don't concern yourself with the body and the dress. Look to me. He is speaking of me, and what he says is right. So I stopped objecting. However, any eulogizing terms about the Risale-i Nur's interpreter that are either explicit, elusive, or indicative, or exceed his due should be moderated. He should feel no offense, for according to our way and in the face of others, especially those critical of us, such favorable views of my wretched self are not acceptable. He, Bediüzzaman, is the Risale-i Nur's servant. He would have been a millionaire today if he had sought the world and accepted all the gifts and presents offered to him, and the alms and charity, donations and bequests. But, just like Umar, may God be pleased with him, he said, "If I take on an excessive lot, I shall never attain to Muhammad the Arabian, upon whom be blessings and peace, the heart of the speaking cosmos and God's beloved, nor to his friends and those perfected persons who have attained to him. I would only get halfway." Complying with the Prophet's, upon whom be blessings and peace, reply to the dictum, "I created all the spheres, everything, for you, my beloved. I have abandoned all of them for you." He abandoned the world and all that is in it, and love and passion, and even abandoned abandoning, and dedicated all of his efforts and endeavors and his life to spreading the lies of the Qur'an. Because of this, all the difficulties he suffered are now mercy, and all the services he performed wisdom. He revealed the beauty on the face of glory, and the world was transformed into a flower bed of perfection. One unaware that his favor and ire are the same suffers torment. Be delivered from that torment. He who is sovereign knows us. Like Niyaz Misri, the interpreter here saw everything to be good, turned a droplet into an ocean, non-being into man, and caused his light to rule the world. The fact he was called Kurdi, and with the inversion and omission in the words Ya Mudrikan in the Qasida of Imam Ali, may God be pleased with him, alluded to the word Kurd, does not indicate that he was actually a Kurd, nullifying his descent from the prophets, upon whom be blessings and peace. This cognomen is merely to announce to the world his being the Risale-i Nur's interpreter, who was born and grew up in Kurdistan and became famous with the name. It is not to prove his Kurdishness. His knowing Kurdish and wearing local dress and appearing thus was to conceal and hide himself. In my view, his purpose was not to deny his true identity and nationhood. It must be indeed meaningful and full of wisdom that he had great love for the Turkish nation, which for centuries served the world of Islam and humanity, and Mecca and Medina and that he spent a large portion of his life together with the Turks. O Lord, for the sake of your noble beloved, for the sake of the blood spilled at Kerbela, for the sake of the eyes weeping at separation, for the sake of the face dragged through the dust of love, grant victory to the Risale-i Nur, to Ustad, and to Islam. Amin. Their intention is to extinguish God's light by blowing with their mouths, but God will complete the revelation of His light even though the unbelievers may detest it. Respected Ustad, I wrote these pieces with the Risale-i Nur's hand, pen, and tongue, a tiny spark which sprang from them to my lowly heart. I seek your acceptance and help so that inspiration should not cease, and I kiss your hands respectfully and await your prayers. Your student in need of your prayers, Hasan Feyzi, may God have mercy on him. My dear loyal brothers, it came to my heart that I should explain 4 matters to you. The first matter. This is the reply to a question that has been asked both verbally and tacitly and in other ways. It has been asked, since the Risale-i Nur is the source of wonders and leads to an unfolding of the truths of belief greater than the Sufi tarikats, and some of its loyal students are in one respect at the level of saints, why don't they appear to manifest spiritual experiences and illuminations and physical wonders like the saints? Why don't its students seek such things? What is the reason for this? The answer. Firstly, the reason is true sincerity. Because for people who do not completely conquer their souls, temporary pleasures and miraculous wonders become their goal in this world and the reason for their works of the hereafter, and this spoils sincerity. For the works of the hereafter may not be sought with worldly goals and pleasures. If they are, it destroys true sincerity. Secondly, wonder-working and illuminations are only for those ordinary people who travel the Sufi way, but whose belief is merely imitative and has not reached the level of realization. Sometimes miracle-like wonders strengthen the weak and the convictions of people given to whispering doubts, whereas the proofs of the truth of belief the Risale-i Nur adduces leave no place for doubts. They afford certainty and leave no need at all for wonders and illuminations. So, since a certain affirmative belief it induces is far superior to illuminations, spiritual delights, and wonder-working, its true students do not seek anything of that sort. Thirdly, a principle of the Risale-i Nur is to know one's own faults and without rivalry to serve humbly seeking God's pleasure alone. But in this era of egotism, differences and a sort of rivalry between the followers of the Sufi way who perform wonders and seek the pleasure of illuminations cause the heedless to think ill of them and to accuse them of egotism and selfishness. This shows that it is absolutely imperative that the Risale-i Nur students do not wish for wonders and illuminations for themselves nor run after them. Also, the individual person is not given importance on its way, owing to the spiritual partnership and the brothers' wholehearted identification with each other. Such divine bestowals as the thousands of wonders associated with knowledge and the facility in the work of dissemination and the plenty experienced in the livelihoods of those who work at it are sufficient for all, and they do not seek any personal attainments or wonders. Fourthly, because they are short-lived, 100 gardens of this world are not equal to a single tree of the next world, which is undying. In consequence, since the blind human emotions are captivated by immediate pleasure and prefer an ephemeral present fruit to an eternal garden of the hereafter, the Risale-i Nur students do not seek spiritual delights and illuminations in this world, lest their evil-commanding souls exploit this natural tendency. In olden times, there lived a person who resembled the Risale-i Nur students in this respect. Both he and his wife were of high spiritual rank, but due to their straitened circumstances she remarked to him on their extreme need. Suddenly, a golden brick appeared before them. She exclaimed, "Look, a brick from our mansion in paradise. But then the blessed woman said, "It is true that we are needy and that we will have lots of bricks like that in the next world, but this one shouldn't be wasted on this fleeting life so that it's missing from our mansion there. Offer a prayer that it returns to its place. We don't need it." It disappeared, and it is told that with their spiritual discernment they beheld it in its place. These two heroic people of truth offer excellent examples for the Risale-i Nur students, and they are not chasing after the worldly delights of wonder-working. Second matter, if the coincidences appear in numerous different forms and in such a way as to corroborate one another, they may afford a degree of certainty that is conclusive and explicit. A sign that some of the letters we wrote after leaving prison were both acceptable and very significant, and that people were very needy for them at this time, was that a sparrow, a Quddus bird, and some pigeons came into my room most strangely and in a way quite out of the ordinary and all coinciding with the others. Then, when Halil Ibrahim, one of our brothers from Milas, received the letters describing the Quddus bird and opened a locked room, in the same extraordinary way a Quddus bird flew in and tried to fly round the room, thus coinciding with our birds. Then, when the students of the Nur school read the letter, two grasshoppers appeared and perched on the letter. And just as these miniature birds corroborated and coincided with the coincidences of the former birds, so, as endorsed by our loyal brothers in Inebolu, when they were reading that same letter, they were frightened out of their wits by an owl alighting at the window and beating the panes with its wings, as though saying, "I am taking an interest in that letter too. Don't imagine that I am not concerned." The large bird was fully confirming the interest shown by the other birds and was coinciding with them. If an imaginary wide-thinking and intuitive person who dwelt on the relationships between the events of the book of the universe from the viewpoint of humanity's situation this century were to endorse so many coincidences looking to the same matter, and the importance of the questions discussed briefly in the letters, would he not be right? For it is as though, with their very numerous airplanes and human birds, men have frightened the birds of the air, which is their world, and in consequence, with a terrible excitement in that world, the birds show serious concern in the face of man's actions, and ask if there is no one to respond to those strenuous, destructive, savage birds, so as to force them to give up their destruction and to work for the profit of humankind and for their prosperity and happiness. Wouldn't it be apt to say they are showing an interest in the questions of the Risale-i Nur? Wouldn't such a thing be possible? Could one way it is a meaningless fancy? Third matter. Recently, I read the Hizb-i Nuriye, a summary of the Supreme Sign, which was composed 3 years ago in Ramadan and published freely this Ramadan. It took me over an hour. Then again in Ramadan, a 10 or 15 minute summary of that summary occurred to me. When I read it, I experienced on reading 2 or 3 pages of Arabic an unfolding of belief and of what is denoted by an hour's reflection is better than a year's supererogatory worship, as though I were reading the whole of the Supreme Sign. I can't find the time to write to you with my own pen. God willing, sometime I shall do so. Those who understand the piece as I do may read it from their own copies, or write it out at the end of either the Supreme Sign or the Hizb-i Nuriye after the Tesbihat and the supplication, instead of our Tesbihat, La ilaha illallah, which is recited 33 times, but only thinking of the meaning of the morning Tesbihat. The fourth consists of 2 points. First, our brothers in Sparta, especially Husrev, the Rose Nur hero, ask about my material winter needs and want to help me. I thank them, but say this: their services for the Risale-i Nur are both profitable for the eternal happiness of all the students and assist my needs for the winter that will follow the grave, my true winter. They perform this so perfectly that they exceed 1,000-fold any aid for this temporary passing winter and its needs. If I had been able, I would have tried with all my life and spirit and the greatest pleasure to meet all their material needs. Don't worry about me. Frugality and contentment are two inexhaustible treasuries. Second point, I was truly pleased by the fine, sincere letters of our brothers in Inebolu and that district, which at one time won the name of Little Sparta and more than anywhere suffered the calamity of prison recently in connection with our matter. Nevertheless, I am concerned that two heroes of the Risale-i Nur, father and son, have been unable to agree completely due to their differing temperaments. But, however unfair a father is, his son is obliged to seek his pleasure. And however rebellious a son is, his father should not deny him his natural compassion. But, for the sake of the Risale-i Nur, and on account of the mutual self-identification of its students, and their not criticizing one another and forgiving one another's faults, let alone such a father and son, and such select, honorable, and leading Risale-i Nur students, even ones that are far from each other, and enemies even, should not allow worldly, trifling, and emotional matters to cause dispute among them. In addition to the respect and compassion demanded by fatherhood and sonship, for my sake these two brothers whom I love should, as Nur students, disregard one another's faults, and forgive one another, and not criticize each other. I send greetings to each and every one of my brothers and offer prayers for them.